Okay, good, thank you. So I have 1 o'clock on the screen there. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Members of the public are invited to submit written comments or requests to delegate for planning related items, including the official plan review, via email to planning@middlesexcenter.on.ca. All written delegation and correspondence submissions will form a part of the public record. Members of the public are also invited to participate in this meeting of council by accessing the meeting, which will be live streamed on our Middlesex Center YouTube channel. So we do have a number of additions to the agenda. They're listed for council on the emails and agenda, the updated agenda. So 5.6 through 16 are all of the items that are relating to the official plan review with the speakers and their addresses appended. Now I'll ask council, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. Then I'm going to read through the official plan review process here and we'll get started. So first, I'm going to ask the council move into public meeting at 1:02 pursuant to the Planning Act as amended for the purpose of the official plan review public meeting. A mover, please, and a seconder. Councillor Cates, Councillor Scott, is anyone opposed? Seeing none, then with respect to opening the meeting, I'm going to suggest that members of the public who wish to receive further notification on the official plan review, please send an email to planning@middlesexcenter.on.ca requesting further notification, or visit the project page found on the Middlesex Center website. Please be advised that comments expressed and written materials presented are a matter of the public record. Those who have requested to speak will be given a maximum of 10 minutes to address council and provide comments on the applications. In keeping with our procedural bylaw and our R-zone policy, I would remind all of the meeting participants to use respectful language and uphold our values of cooperation, trust, and openness. The order of proceedings is as follows. It's the same all the way through. I'm going to ask for the consultants to present first and to present the report, and then we're going to ask questions of the consultants, and then we'll move to the delegations. Please be sure, everyone who's speaking, to state your name and address so that comments can be reflected in the minutes. And I think that's that part of it. I have a list of delegates, so I'm going to start with Matt, the consultant, now as the presenter. And there he is. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good to see everybody.
Likewise. The floor is yours, Matt, if you'd like to start with your presentation.
Yes, thank you very much. So I will share my screen and we'll go through that. Oh, where is it? Sorry, I'm just trying to find the option to share only the PowerPoint screen, but I don't see that, so.
There it goes.
Here we are. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today, members of council, as well as members of the public and folks with an interest in the project. My name is Matt Alexander. I'm from WSP, and I'm the project manager for the official plan review consulting team. We worked together with Watson and Associates on this, as well as working very closely with municipal and county staff to prepare the official plan update. Brief overview of the agenda, the purpose of the meeting, overview of the official plan review and engagement activities. We'll discuss project highlights, key policy changes, a summary of public comments, and discuss the next steps. And I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because it's very familiar to anyone who's been following along the project. So our project team is shown here. The purpose of the meeting is to provide an overview of the official plan review process as it has occurred over the last approximately 2 years. and to present the proposed changes in the most recent revised version of the official plan and discuss how it's going to be revised once again before coming to council for adoption. It's also to hear feedback from members of council as well as the folks who have requested to speak today. So very high level here, the purpose of the official plan is to guide land use planning decisions in the municipality. The current official plan has not had a significant update since 2011, so that's why we're undertaking it now. And the intent is to ensure that the policies are consistent with provincial policy, as well as county policy, and reflect the changing circumstances within the municipality and the region. Our tasks, what WSP was asked to do, was to lead research and public consultation and engagement in this process, review the current official plan and identify policies that would need to be updated based on feedback from the municipality, as well as our knowledge of the planning policies that apply in the province. Conduct a comprehensive review of settlement areas to ensure there's sufficient land available for the next 25 years. Develop and evaluate different growth scenarios. So that's something that Watson was particularly involved in, and review and update all the mapping schedules. And here's a snapshot of what the work plan looks like from 2020 all the way to today. Major highlights for the project have been the initial official kickoff of the official plan review on August 12th, 2020. We call that a section 26 meeting. We conducted a survey that received responses from over 280 individuals. Throughout the process, we met with stakeholder advisory committee that was made up of residents of Middlesex Centre. We also conducted a policy and vision workshop in October of 2020 and held a public open house in October of 2021 to discuss our first initial policy proposals, policy updates. Over the course of this entire project, we've prepared a number of reports and updates to council, including an engagement strategy, background report, several discussion papers covering growth management, infrastructure, natural heritage and hazards, general policy, and economic diversification. And the purpose of those reports was to lay out all the existing circumstances in the municipality and provide some direction as to how to modify the policies of the official plan to address future considerations. We also prepared a policy directions and recommendations report, which set out exactly how we intended to update the official plan back in June of 2021. And in October, as I mentioned, we produced the first official plan update redline version for review and comment. Watson Associates prepared their growth management study initially in October 2021 as a draft. That has since been updated and revised. And we provided the draft official plan amendment, which is the mechanism for updating the official plan in November of 2021. So just as a preface, so we presented that initial draft in the fall of last year. And since then, we've received numerous comments from landowners, members of council, other members of the public, the county, and provincial and conservation authority representatives as well. Based on all of that input, we've made a number of changes to the draft. And I would say that we will still make more revisions after today. So the changes that I'm about to describe are relative to the last draft. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the rationale for some of those policies and some of those changes. And we expect that there will still be more comments that come in after this, and we'll make further revisions after that. So overall, we're proposing over 150 changes to the official plan, including updating language, simplifying and clarifying policies, addressing growth forecasts and policy areas like additional residential units, on-farm diversified uses, secondary plan policies, and surplus dwelling severance policies. The first big thing is growth management. So based on the statistics that are available today, the population of Middlesex Center is forecasted to increase from 17,800 to 35,500 by 2046. And of course, this doesn't necessarily reflect the growth that's happened between 2016 and today. The forecasts did provide an estimate for what the current count is. And of course, the census only recently was released. So we're trying to do that work prior to the 2021 census being released. Watson Associates prepared these forecasts and allocations for each of the settlement areas of the municipality, as well as the hamlets and remaining rural areas. And what this, how this breaks out is that the growth that's forecasted is divided between the major settlement areas in accordance with the percentages that are provided here. So I know there was a question that came in earlier this week about Ilderton growing by more than 20%. That's not what this means. So this means that of all the growth that's expected to occur in Middlesex Center, 20% of it is expected to occur in Ilderton, 63% in Kamoka-Kilworth, 3% in Arva, 11% in Delaware, and 2% in the other hamlets and rural areas. The second table here gets into more detail about what we should expect to see in the intervening years between 2016 and 2046. So at 5-year intervals. And this is really helpful for the municipality because by 2026, you should be thinking about the next official plan review. And you'll be able to look at these numbers against what the actual numbers are and determine if you're hitting those numbers or not, and what might be done to facilitate more growth or slow it down or whatever you need to do. This table also provides a forecast for residential units, and it creates almost a target. So if you want to achieve the forecasted 12,750 new housing units or total housing units, sorry, by 2046, then looking at these 5-year intervals gives you a bit of a target or idea of what you're trying to achieve by then. We also have employment forecasts there, which serve the same purpose. So based on Watson's work, what they found is that there is a sufficient supply of residential development that is already registered and draft approved, but not yet constructed, and designated lands to accommodate the short-term housing demand. And what that means is the next 15 years. So all of the settlement areas, each of the settlement areas has an existing supply of designated residential lands and the ability to intensify within reason to accommodate that housing demand for the next 15 years. So there's no immediate need for those settlement areas to expand today. There is time to plan for that expansion in terms of your servicing, environmental studies and other things. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. In the long term, there's an overall need for an additional 107 hectares of land to accommodate forecasted growth. And what we're proposing is that that will be accommodated with about 59 hectares being converted from employment to residential in Ilderton. And in Delaware, 48 gross hectares will be added to the settlement area. The supply of urban residential lands is determined to be sufficient to accommodate the long-term housing demand for Kamoka-Kilworth, Arva, and other areas. So what Watson had found is basically that Kamoka and Kilworth settlement area has enough land to accommodate the growth that's expected to happen there. It can be on underdeveloped or vacant lots, or it can be through intensification of existing dwellings. And the same goes for Arva. But all of this means that we need to propose expansions to Delaware. And we'll talk about it a little bit in a bit more detail in the next slide, but essentially we had previously proposed a future expansion overlay in ARVA, following direction from council and recognizing the desire to focus more growth in Delaware. We've eliminated that, removed that idea, and put that land into Delaware instead. And this just sort of goes over the same stuff that I just talked about. So here's what that would look like according to the current draft of the schedules. So you'll see in the southern end of Delaware, a large area here that's been proposed for employment land expansion. And so these lands are proposed to be designated settlement employment. This is based on Watson and Associates strategic employment areas study, which they completed, and this is their recommended preferred approach for employment lands in Delaware. We've also proposed an expansion for residential uses to the east here. We knew that this would be required as soon as council had suggested directing growth into Delaware, but we hadn't received very detailed direction on which lands to include. So this was selected simply because it's located along a major road, and I can talk about it a little bit more later if you like. Relatively little constraint in terms of environmental features. Now, the comments that we've received up to today have pointed out that the green area here is not developable and creates a disconnect between these two sections. And I absolutely agree. So we will be revising this and bringing it back to council in a different form. There had been suggestions that it be located to the southwest as well, and we can talk about that. My first thought is there are some environmental constraints in this area that could make developments more complicated than you would like it to be. And so it may be more appropriate to maybe locate along the southern road of Longwood, or southern side of Longwoods Road instead. But we'll be able to put together some drafts and discuss that with staff later on. Part of this proposal is that these expansion areas, wherever they end up exactly, will be subject to a special policy area. And the reason for that is because due to basically time constraints and budget constraints, we haven't been able to do the kind of on the ground assessment of these lands to determine exactly where development could go or exactly what kind of constraints might exist on these properties. So the special policy area says, yes, this is all intended for settlement employment and residential development, but before that happens, full municipal sewer and water needs to be available to these lots, to these lands. There needs to be an assessment and study of environmental features, as well as impacts on agricultural lands and other constraints, essentially to ensure that this happens in a manner that's consistent with the provincial policy statement and meets all the requirements of the county official plan. The next policy area that I wanted to bring up is the additional residential units. So these are second units or apartments and houses. We've modified the policy a little bit. It's mostly the same as it was back in the fall, but we've tweaked a few things. Key points I wanted to bring up. The policy states that an additional residential unit must be 49% the size of the primary residential unit. The intent there is to ensure that that unit is secondary to the main dwelling and doesn't become another main dwelling, because that can lead to conflicts and confusion and that expectation that you could possibly sever that property, that home down the road. We've clarified in the policy that second units, additional residential units, cannot be severed from the main property. We've emphasized that they are secondary to it. And there was a question or concern about, using a maximum floor area instead of a percentage. That could be established in your zoning bylaw, because you might want to have that for different zones. So an R1 zone, maybe you would have a cap by percentage, but in a rural residential, you might want to have it capped as a floor area. But this is a more general policy that applies to all additional residential units. And as a general policy, the intent is cap it at 49%. And how that gets detailed in the zoning bylaws is another issue. I think everything else here is essentially the same, but those were the main things that I wanted to bring up regarding the additional residential units. For on-farm diversified uses, the general policy is the same as it was in the fall, but we've tried to emphasize again that it's secondary to the principal agricultural use. Provincial guidelines do recommend a maximum size of 2% up to 1 hectare of the property. So we have included that in this case. And the on-farm diversified use needs to ensure it doesn't prevent or preclude or limit the agricultural use of the property. But essentially, it could be just about anything. So the provincial guidelines are pretty clear that an on-farm diversified use could be any number of things subject to that criteria. We've retained the secondary plan policies that we introduced in the fall to provide more detail and allow for privately initiated secondary plans. And I think it's important to remember that these policies exist here, especially when we're talking about a major settlement area expansion in Delaware, as well as that conversion of some significant lands in Ilderton. What these secondary plan policies allow council to do is require developers to come to them with a comprehensive plan for the development of those lands, so that they aren't just throwing down a subdivision without too much thought and trying to push it through without considering all that quality of life and mix of uses, social impact. So the intent here is to give council the opportunity to ensure that any new development isn't just a bedroom community necessarily, isn't just a monoculture of single detached houses, but actually addresses the needs of that community. And then the next one is surplus farm dwelling severance policies. And we've received a lot of comments on this one. So since the fall, we've essentially completely rewritten the policy. And you'll see that in the red line. We've just completely deleted everything and rewritten the whole thing. We've addressed the concerns about speculative severances and inappropriate rural development, and we've responded to concerns identified in the interim control bylaw that applies to these types of severances. And I'm going to get into more details on it, but the major changes include applying the OP, the county official plan requirements for these severances, clarifying the terms of the definitions for surplus residence and farm consolidation to ensure that those are the only types that can occur. There's a requirement that both the existing and the new property, the consolidated property, must both have habitable dwellings before the dwelling can be considered surplus. The policy prohibits additional severances from that first lot, and new lots and accessory buildings must meet the zoning requirements. I know there were some concerns about the size of accessory dwellings or the distance to existing farm dwellings or farm buildings and things like that. Those details, those distances and floor area requirements and everything, that's a zoning bylaw thing. And so we direct to the zoning bylaw. And so we'll get specific here. I know there was a concern about the definition of farm consolidation. So we've specified that it means when an owner of a farm property purchases an additional farm property to be added to the farming operation. The key concern there was ensuring that it's actually going to be part of a farm operation, a combined farming operation. So it's right there in the policy. If a proposal comes to you and it doesn't reflect that definition, then it isn't eligible for this type of severance. The second key point is a residence becomes surplus to a farming operation when a farm property with an existing habitable dwelling is consolidated with another farm property or operation with an existing habitable dwelling. And this is in response to the concern that someone might own one vacant farm property and they buy another farm property with a house and they want to sever that house. That would not be eligible because that house hasn't been rendered surplus to the farm operation. It might be surplus to the owner because that owner might have a house somewhere else that isn't on a farm, but that doesn't make the farm dwelling surplus. So that's how we've addressed that concern. And it is in keeping with the provincial policy statement, and it's in keeping with the intent of this policy, which is to allow farmers to sell off the fields and stay in their home, or to allow a farmer to purchase the fields and sell off that surplus home. So together, these policies prevent an off-farm home from rendering an on-farm home surplus to the farm operation. It's very difficult to write this stuff and keep it straight, but that's the intent, and that is, I believe, what would happen. So instead of requiring the surplus residence to be built before a certain date, or requiring the residence to be a certain age to qualify, we simply direct it to the county official plan. And the reason for that is in our review, we saw this date. It's not something that I've seen in a surplus farm dwelling severance policy before. So I asked staff and the county, what's the origin of this date? Where did that come from? Because we're updating now, it's been 10 years, we're updating, so what do we do with this date? And I was told that the only reason there was a date of 1999 was because it was in the county official plan. So instead of having that date there, which can cause confusion, you have to dig through building permit records to find out when the house was built. You might end up triggering an official plan amendment just because of the fact that a house is 2 years younger than you want it to be. We've simply directed to the county official plan. And I've put the proposed policies up here on this slide in case we want to come back to them and go through it in more detail. So like I said, we received a lot of public comments after the release of the first draft in the fall. Major themes, so the vast majority of comments we received were from landowners asking that their property be added to the adjacent settlement area. We reviewed all of them. They were all in consideration because we knew that some expansion would be required, but over the course of this process, the direction from council has been to expand Delaware, but not the other settlement areas. On top of that, most of the requests didn't include a planning rationale for why their request should be honored. So when we're looking at a request like this, the applicant needs to demonstrate how adding their property would be consistent with the provincial policy statement requirements for a settlement area expansion. There are specific requirements there related to servicing, environmental features, agricultural impacts, population requirements, growth, and everything else. In most cases, these requests didn't include any of that information. It was simply an ask to just add it to the settlement area. So we couldn't in good conscience agree with that. And as I said, following direction of council, the direction was to direct more growth to Delaware. There were 2 requests for properties to be converted from employment to residential in Ilderton, and We didn't do it in this latest revision, but my intent is to recommend those be converted for the final draft. And the justification there is that both of them have referenced the fact that Ilderton is indicated as requiring additional lands for residential development. Both of them have been designated settlement employment for a number of years without being developed for employment. And thirdly, the strategic employment study by Watson Associates identified that these lands are simply not well positioned for employment development. That's the purpose of the expansion in Delaware, is for employment lands development. And by identifying all those lands in Delaware, it makes these ones surplus to the employment needs of the municipality. Ilderton will continue to have employment lands. They'll be located more centrally within the town, and there are still opportunities for new jobs and expansion of employment in Ilderton, even with this conversion. I would note too that any residential can be used as a home occupation or home business, and there's still many opportunities in Ilderton. More general comments that we received had to do with protecting agricultural lands and environmental features. There were questions and concerns about accessory dwelling units and granny flats, concerns about road safety and transportation planning, traffic calming. And we also received comments asking that the municipality simply not grow any further, and questions and comments about taxes, which is not within the scope of this project. So next steps. First, some water. So as I mentioned, we've made revisions since the first draft in the fall. We've already identified additional changes to be made to the current revision, and we will be bringing those to council in April as an official plan amendment to adopt. I anticipate that we'll get more comments after this meeting, and for anybody listening on the line, please try to get those comments in within about a week. That would be ideal, because that will give us an opportunity to really consider them and see if there's a way to address those comments in the next revision. But if it ends up taking longer than a couple of weeks, that's bringing us very close to when we would like to bring this to council for adoption. So there might not be any time to address those concerns. So the plan is to present the final revision, the final official plan amendment to council for adoption in April. That's going to take the form of a bylaw to adopt the amendment. And something I wanted to make clear to council is I know there's still going to be some concerns and questions about some of these policies. If there are still concerns at that point, rather than delay adoption of this, because we're in an election year and this has been going on for 2 years already, rather than delay anything, what I would suggest is that you work with staff to prepare a motion to amend the bylaw to adopt the official plan amendment. That way, it can continue. You can bring it to council, get a vote, and make that change before it is fully adopted. The position that I'm in is that I'm here to make my professional recommendation to you about what policies are appropriate for the official plan. And if you'd like to see something that I can't agree to, then that means I can't represent that position at the appeal tribunal. I can't make a planning report that says why it's a good idea if I don't personally have a professional opinion that supports that idea. But council still has that ability to adopt any policy that they vote for. Following adoption of the official plan amendment, that essentially wraps up WSP's role in the official plan update. Municipal staff will then submit the amendment to the county for a decision, and they may have they might have some comments, they might have modifications, but then it'll be in their hands to approve. So for the latest information, the latest draft, and all the reports, you can visit the project website shown on screen here. And any other questions or comments can be submitted to planning@middlesexcenter.on.ca. Yeah, so I understand there's a number of people who are on the agenda to speak, and of course, council will have questions. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has. Now, I'll give it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is that okay, the sound? Yep. Okay. Now, next steps. It is council's turn now to ask questions of the consultants before we go to the public. Who wants to start it off? I'll start with Councillor Arts. Go ahead.
I'm going to cover the surplus farm dwelling severance policies. To say we're going to go by the county policy is a fallacy, because their policy is, to be quite honest, it's terrible. I've looked at it, and you still haven't addressed the concerns that why we froze surplus farm residences in the first place. There's like the maximum 2 acres. It's got to be in there, because we've been jerked around by lawyers on that one. The house has to be at least a rolling 20 years old, because if it's not, I could buy a 50-acre farm, build a house, sever the house, make the money, buy another 50-acre farm, build a house, sever the house. You got to have an age limit in there, and you got to have a size, because we've got some weird lots, and we're going to get laneways on angles. And the intent of this thing in the first place was to keep a rural population, and it's become a money grab for everybody. To be quite honest, it's hurt young farmers. It hasn't done them any good, but the holes that are in this policy are still in the holes in this policy. So it's got to get a lot better, or I won't support it.
Thank you. I'm happy to address those comments. So the first point was about a maximum 2 acre lot size for the severed dwelling. In my experience, when you have a maximum like that, applicants will always apply for the maximum. And so you may see situations where the home is small and it has a yard and maybe a shed. And if you have a maximum size there, the applicant will apply for that whether they need it or not. The policy as written is that the lot must be the minimum size required to accommodate the house and servicing. And what that means is the maximum size is as small as it needs to be. That's where that goes.
But that maximum size could end up being 5 acres.
Well,
I mean, the minimum size could end up that's what we've been getting into. And you know what? Not all houses are going to be severable. Some won't fit. And that's too bad. You can't sever that one. But not to have a maximum. We've had 4 or 5 acre house lots. You can have the bare minimum. There's a minimum, and we've been going by that, but we haven't had anything to stop them from going above a certain acreage.
So in response to your, sorry, Mayor.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying this isn't really a back and forth. We're asking a question and getting an answer.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Matt.
So the second point about the age of the house. So the reason that when I see that, what I think about are farmers who may want to update or replace their home at some point. It happens all the time. They have an aging home and decide to demolish it and replace it with a new home that is up to whatever standard that they like. they don't know what's going to happen in 20 years. So to me, that is not a workable policy, because you may come upon all kinds of situations where suddenly you're in a position where it makes sense to try to sever that home that you hadn't intended to do, and to prevent somebody from severing their home simply because it's 19 years old or 10 years old rather than 20 years old is an arbitrary limit, an arbitrary cap that I can't defend as a policy. So this is exactly what I'm talking about in terms of a policy that council can decide to put in, but I can't support it because I don't have a planning rationale to support it. I have a professional obligation to provide advice and policies that are impartial, unbiased, represent good planning, in my opinion, are consistent with provincial policy statement. There are other policies that council might want to adopt for political reasons or for other rationale, and you have the authority to make those changes. But I have a professional obligation only to recommend what I believe represents good planning. So that's why it hasn't been included in the policy, because I don't believe that putting that cap is appropriate in this case. There are other, you had mentioned other points about the shape of lots, and there are, I understand where you're coming from on that, because you want it to be orderly and you want it to be very clear, but there are site-specific situations, such as if there's a stream running through a property, that would make a natural lot line for the severance, whereas if you were to make it a square box, it would cut across the stream in natural areas. So mandating parallel lines and right angle corners, there are just too many situations where that wouldn't be applicable or wouldn't be appropriate. And the zoning bylaw will address things like minimum lot size. You can put in a maximum lot size in the zoning bylaw as well, but things like frontage. So we talked about flag-shaped lots before, and what a flag-shaped lot really comes down to is lot frontage. So if you have a large required lot frontage, that has the effect of preventing a flag-shaped lot where it's essentially just a driveway that goes up to a property that's mostly behind another property. So in my opinion, those concerns are addressed in the policy and in the zoning bylaw. It isn't worded exactly the same way that you've put it in your comments, but it is there. And with all applications, they're reviewed by your staff, by county staff, and there's an opportunity to refine and sort out what makes sense for the lot. So I feel confident that the policies that we've put forward today are appropriate and do not unnecessarily constrain surplus farm dwelling severances.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Brennan.
To you, Madam Mayor, just to follow up on the farm severances, I'm just wondering if there's any way we can clarify a farmer. What we're running into is companies that have 8 or 9 principals in the company rent the land out, so it's being farmed. They're not actually farming it, but because they're sharecropping with a farmer, makes them eligible to sever that farm, surplus farm residents off. I'm just wondering if there's any way we can tie that down, that this policy was actually put in place for farmers, but we're now getting developers involved doing it, skirting around it. Is there some way we can tie that down?
Yes, through you, Mayor. So the policy states that the surplus, the dwelling only becomes surplus if the other farm property has a dwelling on it. So if there's a corporately owned farming operation and they own a number of different farms that don't have houses on them because they've already severed the surplus property, and they buy a new farm with a home on it, they wouldn't be able to sever that home. If they have a property, if they have a farm property that has an existing house on it where somebody's living, and they buy an additional property with a house on it, then they would be able to apply for a surplus severance. And there's no way to regulate who owns the property. So you can't say only farmers who live on the property can apply for this. That would be contrary to policies in the Planning Act. And it sounds funny when we're talking about corporate interests, but it comes down to a human rights code provision that prevents zoning or policies that would differentiate between policies that would apply dependent on who is using the land. So it's all related to how the land is used. But I think that the policies that we've got here do address that concern, because if you're dealing with a large corporate farming landowner, they would need to show where they already own a house on a farm in order to make the new one surplus. So it's sort of built into the definition of surplus dwelling. I hope that clarifies it.
Yep, thank you.
No additional questions? Okay, we'll move on then. Other councillors, comments, questions? Councillor Heffernan, go ahead.
Okay, I have, this is kind of, hasn't been covered, but I'm just wondering about this. So the PPS and our own official plan states that 20% of growth must be affordable. And I'm wondering if there's any mechanism to enforce this 20% affordability, because what we're seeing, okay, so I've checked out, and in Ilderton itself, I think there was 5 or 6 listings when I looked. The lowest is priced at $799,000 up, and then it goes up from there. And most are in the $800,000 range. And this includes townhouses in Clear Skies. And so I'm concerned that young families, single parent families, seniors that are looking to downsize, right now there's nothing for them. Now I've kind of thought, well, maybe I'm thinking in the old days about income. So I checked the municipal website. There's some job opportunities there. And I know that in general, we think that the income in our municipality is between 125 and 150,000, the average, which means that there's lots of people making more, but there's just as many making less. So I use the Middlesex Center job site, and there's some jobs posted there. So you could have starting jobs, or maybe somewhere in the 50,000. So I did some calculations based on a $90,000 income, which to me isn't bad at all. So that would be both husband and wife or working. And it comes out that they can afford a $200,000 house. Now, if they have a larger down payment, this is with a $10,000 down payment. If they go to larger, they could come up with $350,000 house. Well, we don't have those. And I think that's a huge gap. And I know part of it is all related to, people coming and selling their houses, and, the price has gone up, but that's not helping the demographic of young families. We're losing them. And then, of course, we don't have employment opportunities either at the present time in Ilderton, other than service jobs, which generally pay minimum wage or less. Anyway, I'm just wondering, is there any mechanism that we can enforce this when a developer comes in and wants to, build a mass subdivision like they do? And, how do we make sure that, I did want to add that in the policy revision that you had mentioned, you also mentioned that prefabricated houses were something to look at. And I would agree with that. And in fact, we do have one on Main Street in Ilderton and one on Main Street in Denfield. And I bet you can't tell that they are at this point in time. They've been around for a while, but yeah, so I would like to see to maybe help this out, I would like to see a mix of housing along a street. So you've got your single family, you've got some townhouses, maybe 4 or 5, you've got duplexes, maybe a tiny, not tiny, but small apartment building, and then some prefab houses mixed in there throughout the subdivision. Anyway, I'm just rambling on, but my issue is, can we enforce that?
Thank you very much. So there's a few different ways that the official plan is intended to help with affordability. The main one is by talking about some of those tiny homes, prefab homes, additional residential units, so allowing people to more easily build an apartment in their home to rent out to somebody, as well as the policies related to medium and higher density development and allowing those in more places. That isn't forcing anybody to build it, but it's making it available to folks. The second part is through those secondary plan policies that I had mentioned. So through a secondary plan, and particularly through like a privately initiated secondary plan, the municipality has a little bit more opportunity to influence specific things in a given area. So you'd be able to talk about having that mix of different housing types along the same street, for example. The next thing, another opportunity for you, has to do with inclusionary zoning, which isn't part of this official plan. It's a bigger project to undertake, but it's a new tool available in Ontario to municipalities, which allows municipalities to set bylaws that require developers to make a certain percentage of their development affordable. And you can set what that threshold is, you can set what that percentage is. That's an option that's available, but it's a bigger project. So that requires a more specific study for that purpose. And then the next thing is that the municipality and or the county can build affordable housing. So that's a thing that's possible. It's an option, or partnering with different housing providers to manage properties. Through Section 37 of the Planning Act, you can require community benefits in exchange for increases in density or height. So that's an opportunity to leverage or influence or push developers to provide funding for affordable housing or to make some units available to an affordable housing provider. So there are a lot of different options. I would recommend speaking with the county and working with them to see what the county-wide needs are for housing affordability and what they would be willing to support or assist with, even lobbying the province for funding for stuff. There's a lot of different options available to municipalities, but unfortunately it's sort of beyond the scope of just this official plan review.
Okay, thank you. I have another thing. Can I go ahead with that?
Go ahead, then. I was just going to clarify if you were finished. Go ahead, Councillor.
No, I'm not. Okay. Regarding the land redesignation in Ilderton, now this could be that I misinterpreted what we've discussed earlier, but basically it looks like the population, the employment and everything is going to double over the next 25 years. And so there has to be space for it. Delaware has some spaces there, Kamoka does, and so on. So, and you've stated, I think it states that in the midterm of 15 years, Ilderton does have, between infill and finishing up the existing subdivisions, we're probably meeting our targets generally. Beyond that, we don't have any capacity. So my concern is if the settlement areas, settlement employment areas are taken out, then there's no possibilities for increased employment, which means that, to draw people to Ilderton is not an option. So, and I guess the main thing is where those properties are located. The one on that faces 10 Mile basically would have to exit and enter and exit off 10 Mile unless you want to go through Songbird, which a lot of people do already. They take the construction route to get out. But my biggest concern is the drain capacity or the sewage treatment capacity. And I know, okay, so down in Kamoka, even Arva and Delaware, you've got the Thames River. You've got huge capacity for the effluent to go from a sewage treatment plant. In Ilderton, we don't. It's called the Oxbow Drain, and it was originally the Oxbow Creek, but it turned into a drain somehow. And so even if you do an EA, to be realistic, the capacity is not going to be high enough to put in 2 new subdivisions, which would basically double the population of Ilderton. And so I'm really not in favor of that, simply because I can't see, unless there's going to be a lot of money put in by these developers to look after this capacity, then I'm really concerned about that. And now the only thing I could see is, I think the one developer indicated they want residential, but they would be okay with businesses, commercial and that at the front of the property there. So that would be on the east side of Hyde Park. I might be able to buy into that, but I'm just thinking that, you know, with all these houses, we've already got drainage water issues. My yard is a stormwater pond by itself. And, you know, so anyway, those are my comments on that one. I'm just thinking that I would rather give the settlement area growth down to Delaware as well. So.
Given that's not a policy question, Matt, are you wanting to comment, or would you just acknowledge receipt of the comments?
Oh, I would just say that to provide a little bit of comfort. So no planned subdivision can be fully approved and go forward unless servicing capacity is available for it. Mm-hmm. So you can designate it, and then someone can come forward and make an application. But if there just isn't capacity for it, it can't get built. So you're not going to be in a situation where it makes an existing problem worse. The second piece is that the municipality has begun the stormwater management master plan. So our schedules do identify conceptual stormwater ponds for those properties. So there's a plan in place to deal with that. And I think that's all I could really speak to. I think if there's more specific questions about the servicing capacity for the municipality, you might have a conversation with your staff, and they can get into it in more detail.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything from Councillor Cates, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to thank everybody for their hard work so far. It's looking good, I think. I gave my updates at the last public meeting that we had. And so not too much today, but one thing that I wanted to add, or 2 things really. So first of all, I wanted to say that I really liked the option of the secondary suite and the granny flats, etc. And I also think that it's a real option answer some housing needs today. Am I there? I'm getting a message. Okay. And the other thing that I wanted to add as a suggestion, recommendation, I spent some time reviewing at the end, it's at the end of the official plan, all the special policy, each statements and by the number. And so one thing that I'm wondering if we can do is to not all of them mention a city or, a town or where they're for. So unless you actually have the map and the wording side by side and you're looking through all various pages. So maybe we could just say, I don't have one in front of me, but SPA 23 in the village of Kamoka, so that it's a real quick, I'm only looking for Kamoka things or Delaware things, etc. So that's my suggestion for today. Otherwise, thank you.
Thank you. That's a good idea.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Shipley, did I see your, yes, you were. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Matt, just a couple of questions to follow up with Councillor Heffernan said. If we did designate land to residential and we find out down the road our plant cannot handle this, are we then obligated to supply another sewage plant or expand the one we have there?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I guess the way to think about the population forecast is that's how many people we expect to want to live in Middlesex Center by 2046. And so if there's a position, Delaware is a great example because it does not currently have the full municipal services there. But if you want people to be able to move there, then you need to be able to provide those services. So it's not a matter so much of obligating or having a legal obligation to provide those services, but it's an indication that there's an attempt or an intent to do that. There are other options. So one of the possibilities for servicing are private communal services, which are privately owned, basically septic sewer, but at a larger scale that service multiple properties within a development. So there are policies related to that. They can be difficult or tricky or not necessarily desirable for municipalities because if they're abandoned, then you've got a population of a certain size without maintenance of services. But essentially what we're saying is this is how many people we expect to want to live in Middlesex Center. And if the servicing isn't available to accommodate that, then there's going to be problems and it's going to be difficult. The idea is to give you enough time to plan for that though. So as I mentioned, we've got 15 years of existing supply for residential growth. Within those 15 years, that should be enough time to start to plan to expand those facilities. And I believe there's already, for Ilderton, for example, there is an environmental assessment that contemplates expansion for the next 20 to 40 years. You've been talking about expanding in Delaware. There's and ARVA even. So it sounds like you're well on your way already anyway.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question. Back to the farm severances, not the county does have their or are redoing their plan right too also.
Yeah.
So if this comes to a farm severance, who overrules who if it goes to LPAC? Like if there maybe isn't as many teeth in it as we do they win at LPAC then? Like, I guess that's my concern. We're gonna have two farm severances not exactly the same. Where do we stand on that?
Thank you. That's always a tricky thing. So the county, so all decisions have to conform with the local official plan, Middlesex Center, and the county official plan. And the planners have to figure out how that works, how to make that work. Really, when the county's reviewing this official plan, if they feel that these policies are contrary to the county official plan, then they won't approve them. They'll change them somehow. The general principle is that as you get closer to the ground, you can be more specific with your policies. So this is a perfect example. The provincial policy statement says you can have surplus farm dwelling severances, and there's not a lot else there. And then the county plan currently says there's the 1999 date, and there's a couple other policies there which provide more detail. And the municipal official plan can provide more detail still, as long as it doesn't contradict the county policies. I don't believe that anything that we've put forward here contradicts the county policies. I guess the other consideration is going to be whether it meets the intent of the policies. So if the county says you can have farm severances, but then the local policies are so detailed and so specific that you would never be able to do a severance, which I don't think is the case here. And even with your colleagues' comments, I don't think that would be the case either. But hypothetically, if you were so restrictive that functionally you wouldn't be able to do any severances, I don't think that would fly. So that would be a problem. But at the tribunal, it is kind of a bit of a black box, or it's hard to say where things are going to fall. The county's going to make their argument, the town's going to make its argument, and the applicant's going to make their argument, and the tribunal member has to decide how it works out. So I can't promise you anything on that, but I think the policies that we put forward conform with the county official plan, provide a little bit more detail without conflicting with anything. And we'll see how the county really feels about it when it's submitted.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay. Councillor Arts, follow on.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, to Matt. I just had a couple quick ones. Councillor Heffernan, she was referring to our current water issues in Illerton, like stormwater in Illerton in the current development's not right. She wasn't referring to future expansion, I believe. And for the secondary buildings we're allowed to have, can be 49% size of the primary unit. I know you can't sever them, but we could end up with some huge secondary units because there's some executive style houses. Couldn't you put in the policy that the maximum size would be 49% of the primary unit, or the lesser of the two between a maximum size and 49%? That would cover both sides. Like we've got stuff like that in quite a few policies. So that's just a comment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, point taken. As I mentioned in the presentation, the official plan policies are sort of general to say capped at 49%. But the zoning bylaw is where you would get into the floor area limit. I think that would be the most appropriate there, because I think in the rural areas, it's a very good point. You don't want two homes that are essentially not the same size, but a house and then another house necessarily. And I think that's where it would make sense to add a floor area cap. But in your settlement areas or in sort of other maybe rural residential, I think the percentage makes more sense. And then when there's a specific application, you can make that determination as to what's appropriate. I've seen applications like that where the secondary or a detached garage comes in and it's the same size as the house, or it's larger, and it's kind of ridiculous. But in my opinion, it's just the official plan isn't necessarily the most appropriate spot to put that kind of limit. It's more appropriate for the zoning bylaw.
Okay, Councillor Case.
If through you, Madam Mayor, if I can just add a comment there with the secondary suites. I think that one thing we need to remember is that probably the majority of secondary suites would be in a village setting, not a rural. And in the rural setting, I mean, there's not that many rural settings that are probably massive houses in the big picture, that even half of those is going to, and if there are, then you're gonna, fall under septic system guidelines that are going to need to be met. So I think that the 49, half the size of your existing house is fine. That's just my comments. Thank you.
Okay, Last call. Oh, Councillor Scott.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a couple questions for Matt, if I could, and also a couple comments. And if I'm able to, I want to maybe share my screen here. I'll try that in a minute. I'm new at this, so I just practiced it this morning. So Matt, I'm going to move on down to Delaware now. As mentioned, we've been, the council has decided, that they would like to pursue that Delaware, and I think it's a super big opportunity for everybody, not everybody just in Delaware. I think Middlesex Center, we are a whole, so we don't want to think about Delaware and Ilderton and all that kind of stuff. So some of the employment lands that people are looking for on 402 by Delaware, that's an opportunity for anybody in Middlesex Center to get in and purchase land in the future going forward if we so get that rolling. So I want to comment about that. What I mean, even though there's people in Arbor, there's people in Ilderton that are looking to do stuff. I think as a whole, if we look at Middlesex Center, Delaware is what I'm understanding is our focus. And I think, as I've said before, we are long overdue. It's a beautiful little community. It's close to the 402, 401s. So I wanted to kind of make those comments. And then I wanted to ask you a couple questions just about some of the mapping that you've done. I do see that you've recognized that everything east of Carriage probably is not making sense. And I'd agree. I'm not sure if you got to see my map, and that's why I'd like to show it for the sake of the public, even though you may have seen it, and I'll do that shortly. So I won't go into detail about that, and you've already answered the fact that you've seen that. So I guess my question is, would you or your staff, would they have been, you mentioned being on the ground. At this point, when you did these drawings, would anybody been on the ground to have a look at this? To take a drive around and see what the lay of the land is? For one question.
Sure. So very quickly, no, we haven't. So because of the timing of this project, essentially our budget did not include site visits or travel because we knew we were in this COVID situation and everything was going to be virtual. So we didn't have a budget to make these visits, but that's why we've come to council and come to staff so often through this project is to get that on the ground knowledge. And obviously with the Delaware, we've proposed certain areas, but it's for comment and it's for review, and we're open to adjusting that and changing that for sure.
Okay, thanks, Matt. If I may, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so that's good. That's what I want to know. I find myself, maybe it's my age and that, but the drive is worth 1,000 words, right? So I offered up some tours of Delaware just to see the plan so that they could understand it. And I think most will agree that came on the tour that it certainly does open your eyes to what the plan looked like and then also what it could look like. So there's lots of opportunity there. And for me, I mean, it's just really clear. So I'd like to hope that we can extend that and have yourself or your staff or somebody to come out and do that drive. And maybe that's something we got to talk about if it's not part of the budget, but I'd certainly be willing to do that, to do some clarification, because I think it is really important when we're doing this kind of work and that much, we're spending a lot of money and our focus is on Delaware. I think it's important that we clearly see what's available. So if I can, I'm going to try and share my screen with the map that I drew over top of yours. And I can say I'm not an artist, but I actually was able to get some of this done. So let's see if I can do this here. Okay, let's see if that works. Share. Okay, can you guys see it? Does that work? Yep. All right. So anyway, we took a drive and I've got some comments that are made in here and with little footnotes just saying what I thought, my opinion of what would work for Delaware. And you'll see the area obviously in the blue here that says delete this area. As you mentioned, Matt, there's a huge wooded lot there that would be covered under the Upper Thames and probably would not be allowed to be built on anyway. So using that space, to even attempt that wouldn't make sense. But then what I've done is I've moved down to this area in red here. And when you drive this area, it's very flat, it's very open. I know there's a ridge back here along Miller Road to the that'd be to the west, I guess, kind of the northwest. There's a lot of acreage in there that probably still would be suitable for doing that, in my opinion. It's very flat. And then this area here, I commented saying maybe we could do, a settlement employment area just to replace the employment areas that we got right here in town. So this center part right through here, I'm proposing and had mentioned that we should turn that into residential to replace this area up here. And I think even square footage wise, it's going to be very close. And then in order to get some more employment lands, we could move it over to the east side of Miller Road here. Again, that's worth a drive because there's not many restrictions, very flat, barely trees are going to be lost. And so I think that would work good. So if we drew the outline here and made this part here that's attached to this area here and even along Miller Road, that could all be easily, I think, represented as residential. And the other reason I say that is Miller Road is a dead-end road. It used to go to our dump at one time, and that's been completely closed. So it's a very suitable road to drive on. And imagine having families and different types of buildings in there, whether they're 3-story walk-ups or single homes or whatever. With sewers, it opens the door to a lot. And it's also a nice, quiet road. There's no through traffic there. Okay, so that's just some of my comments. We got a little bit of SBA 4 over here, so where I'm over at Longwoods now and Martin Road. We've got an employment area there that goes right back to Wellington Road. I'm proposing that we move that also into this area and make that residential. And then the front on the commercial, I think the commercial highway in town makes sense. The settlement commercial, the employment commercial, whichever that would be appropriate. So I've made some footnotes here, and like I said, I'm not sure if everybody in the public can see it. I'm hoping so. That I think would be a good idea. The other question I had, which is a small thing, but over here on Harris Road, there's a little indent here. And I'm just curious, what it is a house that used to belong to the golf course at one time, and it was severed off many years ago. And it looks like they just footnoted around it. Not a big deal, but when I look at if you can do a straight line, I'm wondering why that didn't happen there. And then, I've mentioned this, so I won't carry on with that. And then I'm just going to pull up one other map that I got here. Okay. I got to go back to here. Give me 1 second. Sorry for the delay here. Like I said, I'm a bit of a rookie at this, but okay. Share. Okay. Here we go. Yeah. Okay. Can you guys see this photo? Probably not that big. Are you able to see it okay?
No, it's not showing up on the screen.
What if I do that? Does that make it bigger?
I think the best thing, Councillor Scott, is to stop the screen and then try again with share screen to the new one you want to show.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. That work?
Yeah, you betcha.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. So this is basically the option that Matt, that you guys came up with for option 2 for the employment lands, which I right away saw, and I thought that makes more sense to me. We get beautiful coverage along the 402 for the whole amount. Okay, and then you can see I've kind of dialed it in red here and marked it. So we would reconsider the area that was proposed employment area and make that residential. It fits in perfectly. There's residential already along Carriage. There's a big residential section behind the water tower here. So we could include all that into residential and then down the Miller Road style. So even when you look at the whole map as a whole, when I draw it, it really keeps Delaware still kind of confined to I'm going to say a nice shape for rather than better words, but when you drive it, you can see the land is really suitable. And I mean, it's ready to go. I mean, sewers, we're not ready to go, but when we get there to the point, it's not like we got to destroy bushes and trees and stuff like that. So I think it's a real consideration that I would like if we could have. And again, I'm happy to get together and discuss it further, because I just wanted to bring it up for the sake of the public to see it. And I'll stop sharing here if that goes back. For the sake of the public to see it. And then if your staff is able to, if we can make that happen, I think it's worth the investment, because like I said, Delaware, we've designed, we've already talked about, we want to put our focus right here in Delaware. And so I think we got to do it right. And anyway, that's kind of my comments on that. And I will jump back to one other thing that I mentioned when Council Heffernan was talking about Ilderton. I understand the whole idea of designation for the 25 years and for those employment lands. One thing that we could maybe consider there is before November, you come up with some maps that had what you call overlays. So the fact that we're going to revisit this in 5 years, maybe the Ilderton, maybe that could be done. And I not want to speak out of turn for Councilor Heffernan, but you know, an overlay to me just gives it that we maybe could look at that the next time in the 5 years. Because I really feel that we got a big project going on here in Delaware, which is Middlesex Center as a whole. And so I think we need to focus directly on that and get that done. And also I realize timings of the issue too. We want to do it, but we want to do it right. So, you know, I would hope that we can maybe take a look at these lands, redraw that, and then rethink that like sooner than later, you know, maybe within a week. I don't want to put any work too much on it, but like you said, I think everybody's willing now to get this going and get it to a close. So I'll leave the comments. I don't know if you have anything back, Matt, for that, but I'd be happy to hear.
Thank you. So what we're going to do, because I think your maps are very well thought out, and I think a lot of it makes sense. I want to discuss with municipal staff and the county to talk about whether there's anything there that I'm not aware of or that you might not have been aware of in terms of constraints.
Yep.
And with Watson as well, because they had identified their two priorities for the employment lands for Delaware. But I think there's some options there, and we definitely need to rework the mapping. So we'll have a discussion about that and provide something else.
Yep, thanks, Matt.
As soon as we can.
Yeah, no, I know time is always of the essence, but like you said, I think if we can close in on this sooner than later, it's good. I don't know all the restrictions, and that's why I mentioned it. And if we went for a drive and somebody said, well, you can't do it for this reason, okay, you know what I mean? But just from my eyes, it looks like that. And again, I've offered myself up. I'm certainly interested in being involved because it is in Delaware, and I've been around for 35 years here, so I know the lay of the land. I wouldn't mind, you know, being involved in some of the comments or some of the stuff going forward if that's appropriate. Michael, you know what I mean?
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I have one final question. All the maps haven't been adjusted as yet, have they, Matt? Or have they?
Do you mean in terms of the numbering?
No, I meant at the previous October 10th meeting, Councillor Cates mentioned that the lands in the box that is surrounded by Kamoka Road on the west and the Heritage Woods on the south side of Glendon, that is sort of a bite out of the village area. We were under the impression that that area was included in the settlement, Kamoka settlement area. But when I was looking at the map, it currently still is a bite that is not part of the village or the settlement area.
I'm not, we'll go over it again.
Okay.
For sure. There's still a number of things. So we've received a number of comments about, so there are special policy areas that aren't identified on the maps. There's still a couple of other little points that need to be addressed on the map. So we still need to do a final go over, and that'll be part of it for sure.
Okay. I just like to make sure. Yeah.
The mapping has been a challenge. We basically have data from the county, and the conservation authorities, and that hasn't necessarily matched everything that was in the current maps, the current schedules. And so we've had to tweak things, and there's a lot of back and forth on that. So we'll keep working on it.
Okay, well, it came into mind too, because when I reviewed the document itself, there was discussion about how the planning and sidewalks, active transport, all those variables are part of considering a community being built. And we've got people living on the west side of Kamoka Road and on the east side, and there are chunks of town that are missing then, which would, yeah, that integrative planning piece is the part that I'm thinking about there. Okay, that's good. Oh, we've got one more. Okay, one more time. Councillor Shipley, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just clarification, Matt, just along with what Councillor Scott's saying, in Delaware requires a lot of infilling once we get services there. Is that is that infilling included in your projected numbers of growth?
Yes, it is actually. So I double checked that with Watson, and it is because there's been direction to add servicing to Delaware for so long that in their calculations, they did anticipate that it would be infilled to the sort of density that municipal services would provide. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. You're muted.
I'm muted. Sorry. I think that brings us to the end of the questions from council then, and we should move now to public delegations. While Mr. John Lomas gets onto the screen, I'm just going to remind everyone to please make sure that they state their name and notice the time limit, 10 minutes. I'll try to catch attention of people before that 10 minutes is up, just to say you've got a minute left kind of thing. And then I also wanted to remind everyone that if you are submitting content to Matt, that time is of the essence, that April deadline is looming. So there he is. I see Mr. Lomas. The floor is yours. You have 10 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to do is provide a brief presentation. My name is John Lomas. I'm a land use planning consultant. I work for the firm Plan Logic Consulting Incorporated, and my client is Diamond Luxury Developments Incorporated. And what I'd like to do is I have a brief presentation, and that will highlight the comments that I have. And I'll go to it now. Apologize for the delay. Okay, I'm having trouble accessing, so I'll proceed without the presentation. What you'll find on the agenda on page 214 is the property that I'm talking about. It's located outside of the Melrose Hamlet, and it's 1110 Melrose Drive, and it's located immediately to the west of the existing hamlet, to the west of a watercourse. And on the agenda on page 216, you'll see a subdivision development concept plan. My client is seeking to have those lands included, which are located to the south of an existing pond and are outside of the watercourse area in the hamlet area, so that they can develop it for residential purposes with municipal water, but on septic tanks in terms of the sanitary service. And the logic behind this is that it provides an alternative that is in an area where you don't have aggregate resources. You had a major emphasis on Delaware, where you do have aggregate resources which are identified in the Middlesex County official plan. And this area does not have that benefit. And so you're introducing residential uses in an area where you don't have that resource. And also you are separated from existing, one of the main agricultural facilities in proximity is an existing stable, riding stable, and it's located approximately 1 kilometer away from the site. So that in terms of agricultural impact, there's sufficient separation distance between this property and that operation that they can be compatible. And also in terms of the existing configuration of the municipality, the subdivision that they're proposing is similar to Winfield Lane, which is located in Melrose now and is the primary residential community that's located immediately to the west of the existing golf course. So really the rationale here is that the municipality should encourage the extraction of mineral resources in Delaware prior to development and provide opportunities to expand this hamlet to provide an alternative to the existing residential development opportunities in Komoka. And it would complement the existing residential homes that you have on Winfield Gate and Winfield Lane. And there are recreational opportunities that are offered in that type of an environment which aren't available in Komoka. And that's essentially the other comment I'd make is that you have the opportunity of accessing these lands from Edgemount, and Edgemount is a arterial road, so you do have transportation capacity. We're proposing that there be no direct access to that roadway, but that access be off Melrose Drive. And by doing that, it won't impact the existing transportation capacity in terms of the municipality and travel through this area. And that's fundamentally what we're seeking and the rationale behind it.
Okay, thank you. Our next presenter is Mr. Jeff Lunison, and we'll get him up here in a moment. There he is. The floor is yours, Mr. Lunison.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Jeff Lunison. I'm a land use planner, and I'm here on behalf of Comgore Limited. They own approximately 40 hectares of land immediately east of Medway High School and Weldon Park. Thank you for letting me speak. When I appeared before you last fall, I'd indicated that we were in support of the 2021 Policy Directions and Recommendations Report, which recommended population of for ARVA in 2013 of 1,300 inhabitants. I had indicated support for the growth management discussion paper. That paper set out objectives for growth areas, which include proximity to residential areas, making use of existing infrastructure, reducing the financial burden on the municipality, encouraging cost-effective housing, protecting agricultural areas, and accommodating phasing. The policy directions and recommendation report and the growth management discussion papers set a path by council. And that path was consistent with other decisions that you've made when you identified ARVA as having undertaking a EA in the 2021 capital forecast. It included ARVA's EA or wastewater treatment facility EA in the 2021 development charges bylaw and the background study. And in fact, you had commenced, sent out notice of commencement of the EA last year. And while the Comgord limited lands weren't included in the earlier draft of the official plan amendment, we were led to believe that was really just an oversight, that you hadn't received our correspondence early enough and hadn't been able to change the schedules. So, Madam Mayor, you can imagine our surprise when the most recent growth management technical study came out, and it showed council going down a completely different path. The study shows a projected population for ARVA in 2046 of now only 1,000 inhabitants, a 37% reduction. And with this reduction in population, that means that there's no longer a need to expand the settlement area, and the Comgord limited lands would be outside of the settlement area. And these changes that are being proposed are really being made without any new technical or financial justification that we're aware of. We're greatly surprised that this previous allocation for ARVA has now been allocated to Delaware, again without any technical or financial justifications. And while I'm glad to hear that staff and WSP is considering reallocating the lands, if you look at the growth management objectives, proximity to residential areas, using existing infrastructure, protecting agricultural lands, and so on, I really don't think you're going to find that they achieve compliance with those policies to the same degree as if you stuck to the original proposal, which was to allow for expansion of the ARVA settlement area. Any proposed expansion areas are going to be relatively small. They're not going to have parks. If they are going to have parks, they're going to be very small. They can be constantly maintained for the municipality. Both elementary and secondary school children will have to be bused. There won't be linkages with the existing community. They really just won't meet the objectives that you had set out when you had set out your discussion papers. The Comgord limited lands are immediately adjacent to an existing residential area. They're adjacent to a park, Medway High School. They're in close proximity to services. They are impacted by natural heritage features, but in this case, it actually is a benefit because it facilitates the phasing of the development. Madam Mayor and members of council, we ask that you go back to the previous policy directions and recommendations report and identify ARVA as having a population of 1,300 people in 2046. This would be, again, consistent with your background studies, the capital forecast. We ask that you look at expanding the ARVA community settlement area, and that we ask that you include the Comgord limited lands in that expanded settlement area because it's consistent with the provincial policy statement and the policies in the Middlesex County official plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. I'm looking to council. I don't see any hands. Then thank you for the presentation, and we'll move to our next presenter, Mr. Ali Soufan.
Hi there.
Good afternoon, Mr. Soufan. The floor is yours. Oh, there you are. Okay, we can see you now too.
Difficulty. Thank you for having me. Madam Mayor and members of council, appreciate the opportunity to join in the dialogue today. We have multiple sites in Middlesex Center, and we appreciate, and I'm a resident just on the outskirts of Middlesex Center, so I use a lot of the commercial activities there, both shopping and recreational, so thank you for that. Also, we have a number of sites, but the two specifically we want to chat about today are the sites at 22372 Kamoka Road and 10095 Glendon Drive. And I would say to you that they are the missing link between the east part of Kamoka Village and the west part of Kamoka Village. Specifically the old driving range site, as well as the New Biggin lands. And for us, it gives us an opportunity to look at some very unique housing types, as well as some further density within the existing village. We're looking at a very mixed use type development in this area. I know it's early days. We'd love the opportunity to continue to do some of the detailed technical works in relation to some of the environmental assessments, as well as some of the servicing strategies and the urban design policies that we'd like to implement, but really focus on, a very unique type of development with recreation being first and foremost, as well as respecting all the environmental aspects that surround us. We'd like to use those as a complementary type aspect to whatever transpires on this site ultimately. So I'll be short and sweet. We really appreciate you considering just cleaning up that boundary. We think it makes all the sense, and we hope you do ultimately. And we reserve the right to answer any questions or clarifications at any time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? I don't see any. Then thank you. Then we can move to the next presenter. Okay, and that is Mr. Craig Linton. Here we go. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'll be quite brief. My presentation simply relates to 10036 Ilderton Road. Council entertained a severance application here about 2 years ago, I'll say. And it is just simply for the existing farmhouse, which fronts onto Ilderton Road. The farmhouse is certainly a part of the fabric of Coldstream Poplar Hill, just like all of the other homes that front along there. Poplar Villa Limited, who owns the home plus the adjacent farmland, simply want to do a severance on that house to sever it off from the remaining farmland, and because their intent is that they wish to sell it rather than rent it. It is a historical house. It was built back in the 1850s or 1860s, I believe, and they would much prefer to sell it to someone who wishes to retain the historical character of the house rather than rent it out like it currently is. The last time when this was before council, we were denied the application because the owners of the property live on a 5-acre parcel of land outside of Coldstream Poplar Hill. They are in Middlesex Center. And the reasoning was that the 5-acre parcel of land that they live on wasn't a farm, and therefore they couldn't declare the property at 10036 Ilderton Road surplus, a surplus farm dwelling. So when I heard Matt Alexander speak a little bit earlier about the farm policies, there was a kind of a statement in there that you can't discriminate based on age of the dwelling unit that exists already. I feel like this is kind of discriminatory in a way against the owners of the property because they live on a 5-acre parcel of land instead of a 50-acre farm. It doesn't change the fact that the dwelling at 10036 Ilderton Road is surplus to them. They have a couple of other farms as well. And, you know, it's just, we get hung up in the policy wording and not really the practicality of what the situation is. We have a home which is clearly part of the fabric of Coldstream Poplar Hill, and it should be recognized as such. And it should, just the home itself, like the appropriate frontage and the depth of the existing adjacent lots, should simply be included in the settlement boundary. It doesn't make a change to any of the calculations with respect to land needs because the house already exists. It's a fairly simple thing to do, and it would facilitate the severance in a much easier manner than could otherwise be contemplated. And I just respectfully request that to be considered, or alternatively, a special policy that would perhaps facilitate the severance of this property, of the house, because it's inside of, it's effectively inside Coldstream Poplar Hill. It's just a line on a map, and it doesn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense as to why this can't happen. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? I don't see any then. Thank you for that presentation, and we can move now to Mr. Kevin McDougall. There you are.
There.
Yes, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hello, I'm Kevin McDougall. I'm the owner of Comgord Limited and 14501 Medway Road. The property is situated east of Arva, immediately east of Weldon Park and Medway High School. Jeff Lunison spoke on behalf of Comgord Limited and addressed most of our concerns. I purchased 14501 Medway with the intent of building a home and continuing to farm in the near future. The investment was made with the knowledge that Arva would likely grow and be engulfed by Arva. The limiting factor to growth seemed to be the servicing agreement between the City of London and Middlesex Centre, which was drafted in 2000. In 2020, Council allocated funds for an environmental audit for the wastewater treatment facility, a development charge background study, and wastewater treatment facility capital forecasting. As Middlesex Centre was making strides towards developing Arva and giving my strategic location, I built a team of consultants, which included Jeff Lunison, who spoke earlier, to guide me through the development process. I was surprised to see such a significant change in direction, given the previous comments and actions by Middlesex Centre. My career as a commercial realtor, I've seen in the past 2 years, I've witnessed migration of people and industries to southwestern Ontario. The lack of development land as employment land or for homes has caused significant rise in values, setting record high prices. An affordability issue, which Councillor Heffernan commented on earlier, are really a supply and demand problem. This has been magnified in the region as London's planning departments have prioritized high density residential lands, forcing families who want a yard to surrounding communities such as Komoka and Ilderton. The lack of neighborhood lands in London may be an opportunity for Middlesex Centre, should they choose to grow that way. Whether the regional growth is due to the fact that more people can work from home, or homes are more affordable than in the GTA, or simply that Middlesex Centre offers a better quality of life than these other alternatives, I really don't know. What is certain is that no municipality in this region forecasted the growth we have experienced in the past 2 years. I do expect this volume of growth to continue. I would ask council, does the proposed official plan include enough development land to facilitate growth for the next 25 years as per provincial policy? Thank you very much.
Are there questions? Seeing none, then thank you for that.
Thank you.
And our next delegate is Mr. Stephen Stapleton. Hello, Mr. Stapleton.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay there. I was just waiting for the computer to click on there. Yes, my name's Stephen Stapleton. I'm Vice President of Auburn Developments. I have two properties I'd like to speak to today. I did submit correspondence previously, so I won't repeat that, but I will highlight the changes we are requesting. Regarding 10627 Glendon Drive in Kamoka, we respectfully request the removal of the natural heritage designation that encircles the entire property, leaving only an island of residential lands with no frontage onto Glendon Drive. This designation seems overstated due to the type of vegetation that's associated with the property, and therefore we request modification to the schedule accordingly. So that's a relatively simple request. The other item relates to 14494 Medway Drive in Arva, and again, we've provided previous comments on this as well, and given the changes from the draft in October to the recent one, we respectfully request the reinstatement of the future development designation to enable the proper planning for infrastructure and future expansion of the settlement area. This area was determined appropriate to the next phase of development in Arva, and we wish to assert that again in this official plan document, understanding that there's ongoing EAs and future work that will be required. I think the ability to be nimble and have lands available will become more important, especially given the projections used in this OPA update were not premised on the most recent census data. And if they would have showed even more exponential growth. Combining this deficiency with that census information, combined with the lack of site-specific analysis of suitable lands that they're looking to include for growth, they may not be appropriate for growth. They may not meet the PPS policies as noted in my previous correspondence, may leave the municipality short in delivering on requirements as the province desires.
Was that you?
Mm-hmm.
So the one thing we did include was
the one that stays
for consideration was for consideration. Sorry, I didn't hear people talking there. Was a supporting special policy for consideration that will allow for more efficient transition from future development to development, and we're happy to work with staff and refine that prior to council adopting the official plan. So we'll submit that for your consideration along with the correspondence we provided previously, and be happy to respond to any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there questions for, oh yes, Councillor Cates, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Stapleton. I just, could you repeat the address on Glendon Drive? I didn't catch that.
It's 10627 Glendon Drive. It's a residential property that fronts onto Glendon Drive, and it's surrounded by other residents, more rural in nature at the moment.
Thank you. I recall now.
Yeah.
That was previous. I was looking at the recent information, and I recall now. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
I don't see any additional questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Paul Hine, and he's here. Okay, so get that in there. Oh, they kicked me out. There.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of council. At this time, I was just wanting to participate in the public public presentation. We do have we were going to speak to a few issues in the ARVA settlement area. However, the concerns have been either addressed or stated by other people. So I have no further questions at this time.
Alrighty, then we'll move to Mr. Matt Campbell, and who is not here. Okay. Thank you. So next on the list is Mr. Jim Banman then. That was, and he's here. Good. We have you, Mr. Banman. The floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of council and staff. It's Jim Banman from Severance Developments, and it's regarding 89-acre parcel located at 10915 Longwoods Road in Delaware. We're certainly thankful for the opportunity to participate in the official plan review process over the last couple of years, and we appreciate the efforts of staff and council in this process as well. The community of Delaware has a lot of potential and pent-up demand for growth, both residential and industrial commercial. And we're very pleased that council and staff are supportive of expanding and servicing the community of Delaware. Severance Developments originally requested that our 89-acre parcel be included in the growth boundary for residential development. It has the scale and the location to justify the servicing costs to the community. And Severance Developments offered to front-end costs for sanitary force main and pump station to support growth in Delaware as well. This offer was extended based on the lands being brought into the growth boundary and designated as residential. However, in the latest version of the official plan, it proposes to designate all of our lands as industrial and employment. So while we're grateful that our lands have been included in the proposed settlement area, we are not able to extend the offer to front-end public infrastructure for the proposed industrial designation. And there's a couple of reasons why we feel this way. Number one, the revenue per acre for industrial lands in our region would not provide us with the acceptable return on our investment. And number two, the return on investment to front-end public infrastructure would require a longer-term commitment than Severance Developments is willing to extend. And we feel it'll take considerable time and effort to attract industry to a new industrial park. Number three, and finally, we are in a residential land development and construction business, not in industrial. If new residential and employment lands are thoughtfully allocated for Delaware, Delaware has the potential to be a well-balanced community. If council chooses to redesignate our lands to residential and bring them into Delaware settlement area, Severance Developments is ready and willing to participate in funding public infrastructure to unlock Delaware. And at this time, I'll ask if Jay McGuffin from Monteith Brown would be able to participate as well. Thank you very much.
The clerk is bringing Jay on as we speak.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. McGuffin's not on the line, so unfortunately we're not able to bring him on.
Mr. Banman, Mr. McGuffin is not on the line. Is there anything that you want to add to highlight? He's not, I guess, available. I'm not sure.
Okay, I'll see if he's available. He was supposed to be joining us, and I'll maybe contact him, and then he'll possibly join.
Patrick Mikowski raised the hand and wondered.
Patrick Mikowski, does that name ring a bell?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay,
Did you want him to come on instead?
I think this is Jay.
Oh, okay. We think it's an alias.
Okay, thanks.
We're gonna go
All right.
ahead and promote.
Okay, we'll promote him now, and I think we're in business. Okay,
Perfect. Thank you.
there we go. There's
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Apologies.
that's okay. Go ahead. It's all right.
Patrick arranged this invite for me, so there must have been some confusion there. But thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. Just to supplement Jim's presentation, just from a planning perspective rather than the proponent perspective, again, speaking on that same property is owned by Cirrus Developments, Mr. Banman. Just wanting to express formal opposition to the consultant's proposal in the latest version of the draft official plan. In general, just referring back to Mr. Banman's comments, being a residential land developer and a home builder, and his son carrying on in the business also being a home builder, that is their business and that is what they're looking to do. The other larger issues, of course, dealing with the land economics and return on investment for the investment necessary in public infrastructure on the basis of the revenue per acre for serviced industrial lands in the region, and recognizing too that the City of London has a very aggressive municipal industrial land provision program that offers and provides serviced industrial lands in the city at reduced cost as an incentive to attract economic development into the region. So they're a very difficult playing field to market against from an economic perspective. In reviewing the proposed draft official plan amendment, the expansion that was recommended to provide for the additional lands, including the Twin Streams Golf Course and the large natural heritage area, we were very pleased to hear the consultant identify that they have reconsidered or reviewed and consider that extension to the east perhaps inappropriate and are going to be looking at the relocation. Further to that, of course, that represents sort of a strip development of your community, reaching its arm and services out towards the City of London boundary. I'm not sure if that's a desirable goal given the challenges that the municipality has long-standing in its relationship in ARVA. And also looking at the fact that it's only providing municipal services or would provide opportunity to municipal services on one side of the road rather than providing a more comprehensive servicing strategy from a land use planning perspective. We believe that the designation of our clients' lands for residential purposes allows for a cohesive and seamless extension of the existing residential development that's directly to the west, where roads and servicing are already in place to extend into our clients' lands. Our clients' lands also provide the necessary return on investment, again, to assist in funding public infrastructure to unlock Delaware for future development. And we keep making this reference to unlocking Delaware. As council will recall from the many presentations that we've provided, bringing servicing up to this particular property and allowing this developer to participate in the front ending of the cost is based on the magnitude of return on their capacity or the return on investment given the size of the parcel that's requested. So they're able to get the infrastructure investment out of the amount of land that they have. And the net benefit to that is it also allows additional opportunities for those lands that are currently designated but constrained because they don't offer the land area necessary to front end that extension of services in the areas north of Longwoods Road in the existing community. So we believe from a land use planning perspective that this offers not only advantage to this particular property, but significant advantage to all of the adjacent lands that are currently designated but unable to develop without the provision of servicing. On behalf of our client and through our written submission, we had proposed an alternative growth strategy that more similarly aligned with option 2 of the consultant's report that would accommodate a sufficient land area that is unencumbered by environmental constraint that can potentially be serviced in conjunction with the existing Delaware community settlement area and provide considerable access to the existing and planned road network. And this alternative also looks at the proposed employment area that allows for a contiguous expansion of the existing Delaware settlement boundary that maximizes that access and exposure to the Highway 402 corridor. And interestingly, it was very similar if you refer to our submission document where we've outlined the proposed directions from our perspective, very similar to some of the concepts that were provided by Councillor Scott. And in reviewing Councillor Scott's presentation earlier today, I would concur from a high level without all of the background pieces. In terms of some of the recommendations that he was making, particularly in regard to some of the lands immediately west of our client's property, south of the existing settlement that's already been planned for. I mean, there's road stubs there, there's services in the ground. It's just common sense to allow for that residential area to continue to evolve into the land southwest of our client's property as well as onto our client's property. From a servicing perspective, the proposed servicing in the employment area expansion analysis represents a significant departure from the current sanitary servicing plans for Delaware, and is in fact represents a standalone servicing solution that doesn't look at the systematic and comprehensive planning and servicing of Delaware as a whole. Whether the sanitary sewer infrastructure is funded by Middlesex Center through a front-ending agreement, both options rely on having enough properties connecting to the sewer system to justify the infrastructure investment. And essentially, that employment area expansion analysis identified that development of the employment lands should be considered under the study will require full municipal sanitary servicing, and that this area should be considered in the context of a municipal-wide sanitary master plan that would look holistically at the entirety of the municipality and consider future growth lands in the Delaware settlement area. But for the purposes of their study, the employment lands were considered only on a standalone basis. So as such, the report acknowledged that the importance of planning the servicing for employment lands along the wider servicing plans for Delaware, but chose not to complete this step and propose sanitary servicing to the employment lands independently of being able to connect into the remainder of the community. I would just also like to identify one potential housekeeping issue with regard to the mapping. It appears, and it's not entirely clear, but it appears as though there's been an underlying natural environment designation applied to our clients' lands underneath the employment designation. Our client's land does not have any natural heritage features on it. It is a vacant agricultural land utilized for field crop production in its entirety. You can review that and see that on the aerial photography that's contained in the report as well as in our documentation. And we respectfully request that whatever that designation is, environment or what it is, that be removed from our client's property, as it is not factual. So I'd like to thank council. In conclusion, on behalf of our client, we respectfully request that council reconsider the recommendation by its consultant and to have our client's lands designated for employment, and instead expand the Delaware settlement area boundary to include our client's lands for residential development purposes. I'd like to thank council for the opportunity to address you this afternoon. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. McGuffin? I don't see any hands. Thank you for that well-timed commentary.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Our next delegate is Mr. Laverne Kirkness. There he goes. Good afternoon, Mr. Kirkness. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much. I guess the computer was transitioning as you were speaking, and I didn't know I was being introduced. But thank you very much, Madam Chair, Madam Mayor, and council members. My name is Laverne Kirkness, Principal Planner of SPM Planning and Engineering, that is representing Timmerman Developments on 2 sites today, which are listed, I think, as 5.12. My submission is on your agenda, 5.12. But I presume I can share a screen here, just to show you the map, the Delaware map. I hope you can see that. So we've taken WSP Schedule A and we've overlaid some information on it so that we could kind of quickly convey to you our message. And following, I think we get 10 minutes, so I'm not going to take more than 5 because the client himself, Bill Timmerman, is attending and he would like to speak to you directly as well. But basically previous speakers, particularly Councillor Scott and Cyrus Developments with Jay McGuffin, have made our job quite a bit easier because basically our position aligns generally with theirs for all the same reasons. And so what this plan in front of you shows is our 2 sites owned by Timmerman, Bill Timmerman Developments, and one is on the north side of Longwoods Road. That's site number 1. We call that the Martin Longwoods site. It actually has frontage on Longwoods. There's a heritage home on there, and the rest is pretty much vacant. It is approximately it's about 21 acres in size. And then this other site, site number 2, is called the Springer site, and it's about 13 acres. As you can see, and as you likely know, because Bill Timmerman has been grew up in Delaware, he's been involved in residential construction and house building for many decades, and he would like to continue that on these 2 sites. And it would, of course, serve his interest, but I think it would also contribute to the public interest in terms of justifying the amount of land that is needed to justify a sewage treatment facility. Therefore, it would be simply logically added to the Banman lands. So what we are proposing is that would the consultant consider relocating the residential lands on the north side of Longwoods east of Carriage Road, which is indicated by this orange notation, and move it to these 2 locations. It would seem to us to be much better land use planning or community planning. I think theoretically, we usually have communities expand in kind of a concentric ring notion, rather than kind of a corridor or a trajectory notion, which is maybe what has been proposed by the consultant. And I appreciate the fact that they haven't been able to be on the ground and kind of look close. In any case, our request is basically, I think, in the name of good land use planning, by basically taking the Martin Road, Longwoods Road property and except for the frontage of it on Longwoods Road, make it residential, where it basically interfaces on 2 sides with existing residential. And if the golf course were to redevelop or something like that, or some of it, it probably would be residential as well. So therefore, you have this kind of entire residential neighborhood without the intrusion of kind of this industrial development. So we appreciate that this has been brought into the growth boundary. We're just asking it to be converted from employment or industrial lands, rural industrial, to residential. This property down here has long been looked at as a logical extension of this residential area here. As pointed out to you, there are street stubs and extensions and services ready to kind of serve this portion of land. It's consistent with basically for further residential land development to the south and west, if that's appropriate, but we really haven't looked at that. We've just been looking at the legacy of this site that has been looked upon in previous official plan reviews to be included in the growth boundary, but never made it. So we're really hoping the council would kind of take a look at that this time. Therefore, you have this, residential development developing within residential areas and adjacent to it, rather than extending along a road as this is proposed. This, to me, kind of smacks of kind of urban sprawl, but I'm sure there's other reasons as to where that you could try to rationalize it. Madam Mayor, that's what I have to say for Timmermans. I was to be on the list to speak for Doug Weldon as well. I guess I'll wait to the very end of the meeting to be able to do that, because I would like now to see if you could bring in Bill Timmerman.
You have 4 minutes left, and you can continue, but we don't have registered. Mr. Timmerman has not registered, and your presentation started at 3:09. So if you want to address Weldon, this is your chance.
Okay, so just to do that, then I was going to ask if, where am I here? So actually, we have put in 2 submissions for Doug Weldon, who of course is notorious for his ARVA holdings. This is his existing house, and he was asking if he could convert that to a dental office. And we were told by staff that really it's part of the official plan review, but we have heard nothing from our submission about that. So we're kind of reminding staff and WSP to ensure that the hamlet designation would allow the conversion of this existing house into a medical office, or at least a policy framework upon which we could proceed with that view. The last one is another property that's kind of, we were down here. We're now north on Richmond Street in Arva, but on the north edge of it, on the other side of Medway Creek, where he has a property that is designated agricultural, but zoned UR, or urban residential, which is the same as the rest of the village. And he would like to simply divide it into 2, has an existing home here, would like to put a home here, but the policy framework doesn't allow it because it's agricultural. So whether this be included or not in the hamlet, we're not sure, but we were asking staff, how could we make this work? Because it seems to us to represent reasonably good planning. There's certainly a large site here that could accommodate another residence, which would be very similar to what's happening to the north with rural residential as well as to the west. Those are my submissions to you, Madam Mayor. We have not heard anything about that from staff or WSP either, but we're hoping that we will be contacted for discussion or something suggested in the way of how to move these 2 things forward. Thank you very much.
I've just been told Mr. Timmerman is present, and if he'd like to address council now, the clerk has said that he can jump in here.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Timmermans.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. I think Laverne has basically gone over what I was going to discuss, but I can go over a few things here. As you all know, there have been discussions ongoing in the past 50 years to have sanitary sewers brought to Delaware and for new development. We are now limited to available lands for new development and are restricted for development only along existing road corridor within the village limit boundaries. Now the time has finally come, and it appears we are coming to a final conclusion of the official plan. The consultants, planning team, council, and staff recognize that Delaware, being geographically located within its close proximity to 400 series highways, makes it an excellent location for future residential, commercial, and industrial development. It's also my position that future village boundaries should only expand within closer proximity of existing village boundaries and not expand that far out to Brighton Road. Now, I firmly believe that working together with property owners, consultants, planners, council, and staff, we can finalize a plan for new development on full services so we may finally realize the future potential for growth in the village of Delaware. Now, I'd like to comment on a few issues that were discussed previous to some of the people. One was, I guess, Councillor Heffernan regarding affordable housing. And I think Mr. McDougall said it all. Affordable housing, what's happening here, it's all supply and demand. Prices of land have gone through the roof. Prices of lots have gone through the roof because of it. It's like, I can remember farmland. My dad farmed a bit. I mean, at his time, he bought farmland at $1,500 an acre. Not too many years ago, as some of the farmers know, we bought farms at $4,000 an acre. Now in our area here, and I think very similar around the Arva area, it's closer to $14,000 an acre. Port Lambton area, where I have a cottage up there, it's $20,000 to $22,000 an acre. So the problem is there's not enough land available for residential housing and commercial property in some areas, and it's driving the prices through the roof. So it's supply and demand. And I think if there was a bigger supply of land available for residential housing, prices would go down. And as far as affordable housing, there's 35-foot, 40-foot frontage lots today going for $300,000. How can you build an affordable house on it? When the affordable house at a minimum of $200 a square foot, you're paying $250,000 for a small little lot. You're paying another $300,000 to build a modest, cheap home on the place, maybe 1,000 square feet, 1,200. You're still on up with over $600,000. The only way out of this is supply and demand, where there's enough land available for residential housing, or stack housing, where we go up cheap stack housing, which is done in some European countries, where the minimal necessities are put into these places, such as kitchens, when it comes to sinks or bathtubs or flooring. And it's the only way, the way things are going today, that we can come up with, like what Council Heffernan says, something that's affordable at $475,000 to $500,000. But the way it's going now, it's impossible, without going up 20, 30 stories. So that's basically my opinion of where we are at. So I think it all comes down to having enough supply land available for developers, builders to build on, which will definitely bring the pricing down. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Timmermans. Any questions? I don't see any hands. Mr. DeJong, Don DeJong is next on our list.
Good afternoon, members of council. I am just trying to have my video come into play there. Bear with me. Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Don DeJong. We, in this case, are with a simple property on the west side of the village of Kamoka. We appreciate your observation, and I will share a screen for a moment with permission.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I must admit I have too many screens open there. Bear with me once more. Well, as I see it, I will just verbally share with council. Thank you so much. As of my 10 screen choices, not one of them is the boundary of the west side of Kamoka. So what we're with is a small parcel of land on the west side of Kamoka, south of Glendon. That's approximately 12 acres of size. And with that, we have an agricultural designation on it. If members of council are familiar with the area, it is abutting what was maybe formerly known as a recreational sales center. I can't remember the exact name going several years back, but Billy something comes to mind, and Billy's RV or something unusual. Thank you, Mayor DeWitt, you recognize it. And I know that from recent times that structure has been torn down and it's sitting with a limited commercial scope on it, but it's not in the hamlet proper. And with that, to the east of us, next to our residential parcel, we're talking about as 9757, 9749 Glendon Drive, is a designation that gives commercial. In our 12-acre parcel, we have a boundary on the west side of natural environment that just, and to the south, it's a aggregate extraction. It just stops us from doing anything viable with that parcel for agricultural. It's just not logical. And we appreciate, maybe council's observation that the community would be served by having that area recognized in a commercial vision. In discussion with the neighbor to the east briefly, we know they have some large vision for that land. And I think they're with the same observation that maybe it doesn't make sense to have a scoped commercial use not in the hamlet. And we would, just ask council's support for the boundary being a little more logical of including those zones in the community vision more, please. And that's the briefness of my comments today, save and except for any questions council may have.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anyone who'd like to ask a question? Seeing no hands. Thank you for that, Mr. De Jong. And next we have Lindsay.
Thank you.
We have Lindsay Clark. Oh, there we go. Hello, Ms. Clark. The floor is yours if you'd like to make your presentation.
Great, thank you so much. I'm just going to share the presentation. Great. So good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm Lindsay Clark with Sifton Properties Limited, and we have submitted a letter and presentation pertaining to the official plan review. To be respectful of the time allocation, I will provide an overview of the key objectives from the letter and associated presentation. So the key objectives from the letter include the following. So after review of the final growth management strategy, it is our opinion based on the conclusions, there may not be sufficient supply of inventory over the planning horizon. We believe additional validation is required to ensure the conclusions are accurate through peer review of the growth management strategy and input of the 2021 StatsCan census data that was released on February 9th, 2022. In addition, the growth management strategy only provides the minimum residential land needs based on the PPS and should be reflective of the current market supply and demand needs to allow for optimization of potential growth in Middlesex Centre. To be noted that the census metropolitan area for London includes Middlesex Centre and has recently been identified as 4th fastest growing metropolitan area in Canada. On this basis, we believe in order to respond to the increasing pressures and demand for housing, greater emphasis is needed on the supply to provide choice, location, and affordability. We are in support of the recommendation in the growth management strategy for the conversion of employment lands to residential in South Ilderton, and can validate the current inventory is limited and will be built out by 2025. To help facilitate further supply to meet the demand in Middlesex Centre, we are also requesting the inclusion of 9803 Glendon Drive and be included in the urban growth boundary located on the west side of Kamoka's core. In addition, we believe adding flexibility into the official plan policies to allow for swapping of lands provide additional growth for sites more readily available for development. So just to go through briefly our current investments in Middlesex Center, we currently have 2 subdivisions that I'm sure many of you are aware of. So we have Clear Skies located on the northeast corner of Ilderton, as well as we have Timberwalk that's located on the south west side of Ilderton. So when we're looking at our current inventory for Timberwalk, presently we have, we're working on building out the final phase and will be built out by 2023. We only have 137 lots/units remaining for this subdivision. When looking at Clear Skies, we currently have, we're currently completing the 3rd phase in Clear Skies and have 1 final phase to remain and have 304 lots and units remaining, which will be built out by 2025. So when looking at this, I do want to respond through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Hefferman's comment regarding servicing in Timberwalk. We do have existing servicing as part of Timberwalk that actually can help facilitate a potential future residential designation that is currently being proposed for the 21.1 hectares of lands that we currently own to the south of our Timberwalk subdivision. So just to clarify that there is existing servicing that is there today. No additional servicing would be required to be installed to support that future potential development to the south. And then moving forward here. So overall, between our 2 sites, we have 441 lots remaining in Ilderton. And again, it will be built out by 2025. From the review of the growth management strategy included in table B.2, it has identified that Clifton currently has 689 lots and units in Ilderton, but based on our 441, that leaves a difference of 248 lots and units that doesn't exist in the inventory for Sifton sites as of today, which validates the need for additional supply in Ilderton through the employment land conversion and the necessity of peer review of the technical reports to ensure the accuracy. And then moving forward here, just looking at the proposed red line revisions in the official plan has identified the population, our projected population to 2046. So Ilderton's projected population growth is approximately 3,100 between 2021 and 2046, which translates to approximately 1,107 units based on a 2.8 person per unit. So effectively, we're trying to understand where these units will be located in Ilderton to meet that objective for the projected population. In addition, Kamoka's projected population growth is approximately 10,100 people during the same period, which translates into approximately 3,607 units based on the same PPU. But we are concerned with the current vacant land inventory and the ability for it to sufficiently supplement the projected population to 2046. I also want to make a note, there is a variation in the population from the growth management strategy versus the red line revision that red line draft official plan that I'm showing on my screen here. There are numbers that aren't quite matching, so just to identify that. And also speak about some of the mapping features on Timberwalk Phase 5. There is some environmental features shown on our existing lots. So I think there's also a need for updating the mapping and removing that environmental designation that has been part of the base plan there for the mapping. So based on the 2021 StatCan census data for housing, Middlesex Center has grown by 11.9% in 5 years, with no indication the market is slowing. Additional land would help to facilitate the overall supply needs and help with the affordability of housing in Middlesex Center. So moving forward, we believe additional supply is needed in Komoka. Currently, there is no expansion of the growth boundary on the west side of Komoka's core, and we believe this is an appropriate location for inclusion, specifically related to 9803 Glendon Drive. The site is currently designated as rural commercial and is isolated from future development options by excluding it from the settlement growth boundary. It is an ideal location for redevelopment with a close proximity to the heart of Komoka, with access to the wellness center, community center, and shopping. It provides more choice with great access to the 402 and London, and the ability to utilize existing services adjacent to the property. In conclusion, we strongly encourage action by council to include more lands that is readily available for development in the short and medium term to meet the pressures of housing supply within the municipality. Please let me know if you have any questions, and thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for that. Are there questions of the presentation? I see no hands. Thank you then, and we can now move to Branch. There she is there, coming on.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Ms. Branch. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Wynn Branch, and I'm a resident of Old Kilworth. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak once again. My presentation focuses on the vision and mission statements, as well as comments mainly on the first section as they relate to Komoka Kilworth. The vision revisions do seem to reflect our community positively. Language such as thriving, progressive, welcoming, rural roots, natural spaces are all great things for me to hear. The mission statement: deliver the highest standard in municipal services, sustainable, professional, innovative. The terms professional and innovative are open to wide interpretation, and the adherence would depend on the perspective of individuals. So I'm just cautious about that because people have a different view of what progress is. And I'm just more cautious of negative changes that might be seen in that. I was really pleased to hear from Matt Alexander's presentation that there is no need to rush changes or development. And I do have some specific concerns about intensification plans for Komoka Kilworth. In section 1D, the definition of settlement area edges. So I'm assuming that you mean the geographic boundary. So I understand that Komoka Kilworth is considered a settlement area. The edge of it on the east side has recently undergone a number of changes in owners. And if intensification and reducing the amount of land required to accommodate population growth here is still a plan, I have serious concerns, and my remaining comments focus on that first section of version 6 of the official plan. Section 1.7M, it talks about a complementary subdivision and site plan design. So along with street patterns that disrupt are not, sorry, I thought my camera was on, my apologies. I'm going to try and get that on. There we go. My apologies.
Not at all.
I'm just concerned that if we're adding into that, it will indeed cause significant disruption. And any shift to medium or high density housing at the top of Elmhurst, I don't think should be accepted. 1.7P, even though some say that adding many residents will help to meet the growth needs, this seems short-sighted since council is looking at long-term planning. The congestion and negative impact on that area in terms of both traffic and water systems I think should lead council to maintain that designation as low density. 1.7U discusses the efficient and safe transportation network, including pedestrian and cycling. That was great to hear, and I'm glad it's still in there. This is such an important aspect of planning. However, if that densification happens there, it will make the larger consequences as a negative growth we see for the municipality because of the amount of infrastructure that will be required. It simply makes more sense to keep this area as low density because of the proximity to the bridge and the congestive nature of all kinds of traffic in that area. There's a similar issue with lack of compatibility of any significant densification in Old Kilworth. As sections 3.1, A, D, E, and L are very appropriate and very, very good to see there. These are goals of protecting, sustaining, and enhancing environmental features, such as preventing incompatible development, and therefore promoting the retention of existing corridors and preventing flooding. All of this applies to this area. Section 5 seems to indicate that all of Kamoka Kilworth is serviced with municipal water. Maybe I'm not reading that correctly, but Old Kilworth does have our own wells and septic systems. So this concludes my presentation, some of which I have stated before, and I think I feel like the lone rider out there just presenting my concerns as a citizen. But with the hopes that council can see that any intensification needs to be done cautiously so we do not regret developments that cannot be undone. Although changing a few lots from low to medium or high density may seem minor, we all know that small changes can have a big impact, and I'm sure we all want to ensure that any impact is positive for everyone for the long term. Thank you.
Are there questions for this delegate? I see none. Thank you for that presentation then.
Thank you.
And we have Ms. Stacey Graham next, please. Okay, we're not seeing the next speaker, so we're going to ask, are there any members of the public who are attending who would like to comment on this document today? If so, please use the raise hand feature and the clerk will admit you. Given that we've had so many people and people have maybe had to jump in and out, I want to make one more call. This will be the last call then for any members of the public who have been attending or have stepped away. If you'd like to comment, please use your raise hand feature now, and you'll be given your opportunity to make your points. And Stacey Graham's not there yet either. No.
So at this time,
okay.
We have no raised hands.
I will go back to council then.
That's right, to Matt as well.
Okay, here, then we're going to move ahead now. That is it for the delegates at this point. I'm going to ask members of council, any thoughts or additional questions for the consultant based on what we've heard today? I don't see any of those. Matt, would you? Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor Brennan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just a comment. I think we're on the same page as far as expansion goes. We don't want to go into the agriculture areas. I think we're all on the same page there. We want to confine things within the hamlet zonings. And if we're going to do that, then we need to consider apartments, obviously. We've got to give access to growth. And if we're not going to expand the hamlets, which I totally agree with, I think we need to preserve agricultural lands. Then I think in this official plan, we need to have designation for apartment buildings. And that's something council should look at, I think, and should try to decide what height we want to go within that. So I think that's just food for thought for now, because I think we're going to have to address this in order to preserve agricultural land. I think it's something we've got to consider. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move back to Matt then. If you would like to maybe just comment or observations, pull it together for us.
Thanks a lot, Mayor. And thank you to everybody who made time to speak today. I believe we received written submissions from everybody who spoke today. If not, please submit your written comments as soon as possible, hopefully within the next week. It doesn't have to be very official or professional or anything. You can just send an email with your thoughts. I've been making notes through the whole meeting, and we have a number of things to discuss with staff internally, with Watson, and a lot of work to do with my mapping folks. So I really appreciate all the feedback and input that we've got today and in the lead up to this meeting. No other major final thoughts, just a big thank you to everybody for participating. And we will work on making our final revision as quickly as possible. It's basically my top priority right now, to the chagrin of my other clients, but that's okay. It's the way it's supposed to be, right? So, but no, this is really good. I feel like we're very close to the resolution of this, and I think it's going to work out well.
I can't agree more. I think this is a really good policy document. I know we're sometimes getting into the weeds of how to interpret things, but I mean, that's what we have committees of adjustment for. That's why we have other bylaw procedure. There are ways of getting around that. I think you're right. I think we're almost there and we've got the bulk of the work done. So I would like to thank you for all your efforts and explanations and patience in dealing with our teaching us, if you will, Matt. That's there's a lot going on here, so appreciate all your efforts, as well as Watson's. I thank staff as well for all the work that they've been doing, both working up and down the chain here with us as well. Council, there's been a lot of reading and a lot of thinking and a lot of pondering, consultation, tours. All of that work has been, I think, time well spent, and I think have a good understanding of where we want to go. Also, thanks to the development community and members of the public who participated. So if there are no more questions or concerns, I think we're going to wind up today's meeting. And the motion before us is that council receive the official plan review presentations and public meeting as information, and the council direct staff to finalize the official plan and bring forward a recommendation for approval. And further, that council rise from the public meeting at 3:48 and return to regular council to follow in a bit. Council Deputy Mayor Brennan and Councillor Cates, is anyone opposed? Seeing none, then the meeting is adjourned. Oh no, sorry.
Correspondence?
Yes, there was correspondence to receive. I'm so sorry. So the correspondence is well, documentation for most of the people that we saw today, items 5.1 through 16, and the motion is that council for the Municipality Middlesex Centre receives said correspondence as information. A mover, please, and a seconder. Councillor Heffernan, Councillor Cates, and anyone opposed? Seeing none. And our bylaw is that bylaw 2022, number 25, be adopted as printed, and that bylaw is that we adopt and confirm all actions and proceedings of this meeting. And a mover, please. Seconder. Councillor Shipley, Deputy Mayor Brennan. And now we can do the adjournment. that council for the Municipality of Middlesex Centre adjourns the March 16th, 2022 council meeting at 3:49 p.m. And we have Councillor Shipley and Councillor Heffernan. Anybody